Okay, so I have made a handful of videos about gender and all of that since I made this channel. And I really want to like lean more back into that just because I feel like that's a really, really important topic to me, just because I think that a lot of people experience just things internally about gender and what that means and what that looks like, no matter what your sexual orientation is. Obviously, we know there's a lot of gender norms, a lot of gender expectations, and it is something that I think affects everybody in some way, some more than others. But nonetheless, I think that it affects everybody. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about navigating the world as a non-binary person, especially considering how extremely binary the world is and our society is, and just how I navigate that, especially now that I have just more understanding, a lot more understanding of like who I am and how I view the world and how I like am received by the world and all of that. And it took me a long time to like really make sense of it all, just because, as I already said, gender for some people isn't black and white, which is, I'll get a little bit more into that in the video. And I think that it's something that now I have much more confidence and like understanding of myself to be able to talk about it openly. I've always been a pretty open person, but I think with this particular topic of gender, I never really had the words to explain how I felt. And going into a world where there's a lot of labels for a lot of things, even within the queer community, outside the queer community, wherever, there's so many labels for like everything, that it became to the point where it's like, I don't even know, like it becomes overwhelming to a point where, it's just easier to kind of be more inward about gender and what that mean, or it felt this way, to be more inward about gender and what that meant to me, until I kind of like really gave myself the grace to kind of like like approach it slowly and without any sort of like, I have to have this figured out now. Having a partner that is extremely supportive and like just understands things that I am feeling without really me having to explain a whole lot is really helpful, and has really helped me kind of like slowly and gradually come to realization about who I am, because I wasn't being pushed by my partner, or like, she has never been like a rush kind of person to say like, okay, you need to have this figured out now, or like just very supportive and just understanding, without me having to, even when some things maybe didn't make the most sense or I wasn't clear about what I was feeling, just her reiterating that like, hey, you don't have to know everything. And that really helped me to be able to know more as time went on, and all of that. So to get kind of into it, for me, identifying as non-binary has been very eye-opening for a plethora of reasons, but mostly because I realize how much I have always kind of operated in my own head outside of the binary, even at a young age. I didn't obviously have the words for that. I didn't have any definitions or anything like that. I just knew how I felt was more, hey, like, I don't really fit into any group. I wasn't really like a kid or a person that tried to fit in too hard. Like, I feel like just naturally I gravitated towards different types of people in different, in different groups that, are cliques, if you want to call it that, like in high school and stuff like that. But with being that way, it was always hard to kind of find like a place or a group of people that felt like these are like my people, because I had different people in different kinds of things, right? Like I play sports, so I always had a lot of friends in basketball and things like that. But I also, again, just love to talk to people. I've always been that way. So I had friends that were in activities that I never participated in that I was, really cool with. And just, although that was great on one end, it left me not really having like a true set of people that are like kind of for me. If that makes sense. And I never really experienced having like a friend group, like a designated friend group where we're all, doing things together on a consistent basis. It's always been kind of like one-off friendships for me, which have been great. Like, I love my friends. I love our dynamic and things like that. And it's something that I have learned to embrace, because it's not a bad thing. It's just something that, when you never had like a friend group, that can be, and you see other people having friend groups, it can be like, man, I wish I had that group of people that I could, go and travel with and go do different things with. And that's not really something I've ever had. And I'm not necessarily insinuating that has to do with being a non-binary, not at all. But I say that to say that growing up, I never quite had people who maybe thought like me in regards to gender, especially at a young age. You don't have the language for that, especially back when I was a kid, or teenager. I don't really remember hearing, like, I think the pronouns and language around gender was not really as as like clear as they were now. You know, and again, I just knew what I felt. I didn't have literal like labels or definitions or anything like that. So as I got older and really like realized that like there was always something internally that made me feel like I don't fit in with boxes as it relates to gender. I am a more masculine, I'm a masculine presenting person regardless of gender aside. I just present in a masculine manner or a masculine way based off of what society views as that. I definitely align more with masculinity in terms of like the qualities that we have learned about what masculinity means, specifically healthy masculinity. I really enjoy those traits, but also I really, really enjoy what is considered to be more feminine traits and have never shied away from that as a masculine presenting person. Like I'm not one of those people who feel like there's some sort of weakness that comes with having more gentle, more, I don't even know what's the, that's why I hate to get into like the labels and the words, because like, but for the sake of the video, like having more gentle approaches to things or being more sensitive about things, like that's not something that I've ever been like, that's a flaw. Because I think for me, I've always I feel like I've always liked the concept of blending and mixing things together, and that something isn't black and white to an extreme. I think that my personality generally, like I enjoy looking at things from a blended way and being able to like understand that, you know, different components of different things can make a really beautiful thing at the end of the day. And I think that gender is very much so that. So as I got older, and especially in regards to like religion and things like that, that became very hard to navigate, because there is you know, in my experience, in certain black spaces, especially specifically Christian spaces, there is very little room for there to be gender expression in various ways. It's very black and white. It's very, you should be looking like this, why do you not look like that? It's like kind of a lot of what's the word, there's a lot of not investigation, but I feel like there is a lot of what is the word when somebody is like scoping you out kind of thing. There's a lot of like paying very close attention to how people present themselves, and not even just when it comes to queer people, how women are expected to look and act and be within the church setting, or within any setting for that matter, if they're Christian or if they're, you know, coming from like a religious family, or, you know, serve in religious communities and things like that. There's an expectation for how, you know, cisgender women are supposed to just behave and all of that. Same for cisgender men, or men period, or people that identify as a man. You know, and how that is expected within, you know, black religious spaces, black Christian spaces, and just black families generally. Like, even to take it off religion, how a lot of black people, in my opinion, their bodies, how they present themselves, are kind of policed of having to show up in a certain kind of way. And that's not just for people who are non-binary or queer people, that's everybody. I have experienced and have seen firsthand different groups of different people within the black community just get policed of how they need to present themselves and how they need to be. And it comes to a point where it's exhausting, which leads me to, you know, as I kind of came more into myself in my maybe mid-20s up until now, and realizing that, like, yeah, I do not identify with things that that directly connect to what womanhood means in our society, what a woman is, and really for me, what a woman means in my brain for myself is I was biologically born this way. That's pretty much it. Like, outside of that, in a social standpoint, I don't identify with anything that is defined of what a woman is. And I feel like characteristic wise and trait wise, I definitely identify more with what a man is, or what the man is expected to be, or not expected to be, but what a man typically kind of portrays. But even that, I don't fit into what you know, what it means to be a male, because I don't feel like I need to. I don't have to. I'm just me. I think that I realized that being non-binary and what that means for myself means that, like, all I know is that inside I feel like Breon, I feel like me, and that's it. There is no gender attached to that. It's just me. And if anything, what is attached to it is more of a, you know, masculinity with a blend of femininity, when, you know, when those traits come up. And I feel like that is how I identify best. That makes the most sense to me. And I feel like that now that I have words for it, and now I have people in my corner who understand that about me. My partner obviously knows this about me, and, you know, that's never been any sort of secret in our relationship. We've talked about these things for so long, even before I had the language to say non-binary. We have always had that understanding and talking about gender, but like now that I have other people outside of my partner, friends, close friends, and some family as well, that understand and know that they may not understand everything, but they know that this is how I identify, and this is how I would like to be addressed. That has been really helpful to me. And it's like, I also realize now that my goal isn't to necessarily have everybody in my life understand everything about gender and what it means for me to be non-binary, because it also isn't, I mean, I want people to care, but it's also like it's not their journey to necessarily have to understand every waking thing. I would want them to want to know a lot, but like, that's not, I just want people around me that respect how I present to the world, and whatever comes from that happens naturally and flows naturally, kind of thing. So I think that it is very definitely tough at times, realizing I didn't really notice it as much until I started realizing more about myself, just how binary this world is. Like, everything is binary when it comes to, obviously, you have the bathrooms. That's a big one. That's not something I thought too much about before, because again, I didn't have the mental capacity and space to think too much about gender, and had other things in my life going on that I never thought I would reach, being able to think about this stuff. But even just the bathroom, that is a huge thing that I understand more now. I understood it to begin with, but having a gender neutral bathroom, in my opinion, I think is just like so important. And I understand why it is important to so many people who may not be non-binary. It could even be cisgendered men or women. It doesn't matter. But for me, as a non-binary person, it has been like crucial when I walk in somewhere and I see they have a gender neutral bathroom, or that they recognize that it's like immediate like sigh of relief, because there is a lot that comes with emotionally, or just internally, a lot that comes with going into a woman's bathroom as somebody who is masculine presenting, who doesn't identify as a woman, and what that feels like going in. Not to say that anything bad necessarily happens, but it's uncomfortable. It's not comfortable. It's just like a cisgender man walking into a women's bathroom and being expected just to be like, oh, you can still go to the bathroom. Like, no, it's not that simple. And I think that now in my adult life, now that I have the words to explain myself and how I view myself, those things like that are very much so important. And I never would have thought that, like, in my life, that I would have experience like walking into a building, or walking into a restaurant or wherever, and being able to see like, oh, they have a gender neutral bathroom, cool, great. And then having to make that like decision in real time of like, okay, should I just wait to go to the bathroom? Should I just just go into the women's restroom really quick? Like, it's just so many thoughts that go behind that, that is sometimes exhausting, but it's just kind of comes with the territory. And I'm still in real time kind of figuring that out, and not like, not beating myself up too hard about it, because at the end of the day, like, I don't want to walk around stressed about it or anything like that. But it still is something that, as a non-binary person in a very binary world, is something that I have to come across on a regular basis. I would say another thing is, I'm trying to think, stuff that's just like everyday kind of things. I would say when people address you and they don't know you, and somebody may address you as she, her, and all of that, and it's like this internal feeling that happens, that you're not mad at them because they don't know. You can't be mad at somebody for literally going off of what they think that you are, or what they see you as. But it is kind of like a radar now is up with being able to pick up on when somebody addresses me as she, her, or anything like that, and it being like an uncomfortable feeling internally, because I know that that's not how I identify, but that the world, again, me as a person is going into a world of people who don't know me, who have no idea who I am or how I think or anything like that, and having to like kind of like adjust and kind of figure that out in real time. I feel like that I try to kind of, I don't say pick my battles, because they're not battles, but I try to be mindful of like every interaction does not have to be, for me, I know for other people that may be different. There's nothing wrong either way. There's not a right or wrong answer to it. But for me and how my brain works, it becomes kind of exhausting, feeling like, okay, let me make sure I announce every single time, like, hey, I use they, them pronouns, just because I'm also a person that doesn't like a whole lot of like, hey, look at me kind of thing. I just want to enjoy what I'm doing or experience whatever I'm doing and kind of move along. So like I have also learned to, you know, be strategic about how I choose to address that. You know, if there's a way for me to address my pronouns before I go somewhere, that's completely definitely helpful. But if I can't, you know, just knowing how to kind of like go with the flow for what I know is going to work for my nervous system, and not getting too wrapped up into the pronouns, just because I know for me that makes it more stressful, and I just want to be able to like enjoy things without it having to be kind of like a coming out conversation every time, you know what I mean? Because for me, that's exhausting. I've spent a decent amount of my life having to explain stuff about my gender, sexuality, and all of that. And I'm at a point now where it's like, hey, like, I don't have the energy to want to do that every single conversation, especially if this is just a, hey, we're at a restaurant or, you know what I mean? It's different if I'm going to be seeing somebody on a regular basis. If it's something that I'm like, you know, I don't know, like a doctor or like somebody that I'm going to on a regular basis that I see often, yes, I'm gonna say something, or I'm gonna make sure to share that. But that's another thing that I feel like I've had to kind of, you know, pay attention to myself and what I'm looking for in regards to that. And I would say lastly, I think it's just communicating with people that have known me a very long time as something else that I'm not now is tough. Because not so much because everybody is like, oh, I don't want to, you know, pretty much everybody that I have been in communication with my family has been very open and very supportive, and just like, hey, like, you know, this is going to be an adjustment, but I want to address you how you want to be addressed. And that's been very, very, very nice and very comforting, because I didn't really think I would get that, honestly. Not from anybody in particular, but just family generally. My experience in that regard, which I've talked about in other videos, has not been the greatest when it comes to talking about these things. So, but I do think there's this sense of vulnerability that comes with sharing this kind of thing with people who knew you as this other person, or this other, I don't want to say thing, but in this other way that you don't identify with. And and I didn't identify as that back then without even knowing it. But like, you know, I of course wasn't going to say anything as a young kid or as a teenager and stuff. So that has been definitely an adjustment and difficult at times, just because, yeah, it's much easier to share and open up about things and be vulnerable with people that you recently met and you're like who you are now, versus people who saw you since you were 5 years old. That is definitely, there's a difference there for sure. But I've been making sure to just kind of give myself the grace and like patience to just like go with the flow with things. I don't have to have it all figured out. And it's been really helpful for conversations to kind of happen naturally with family and people that knew me growing up and things like that. It has definitely been much easier than I thought, because I'm not like trying to force it, basically. I just let the conversations happen. If they happen, and if they don't, they don't. But nonetheless, man, this is already at almost 20 minutes. So those are just a few things. Maybe I'll do like a part 2 to this at some other point in time. I don't want to make it extremely like, here's everything about being non-binary, because I also don't want to come off like being non-binary means different things to different people. Just like gender means different things to different people. And I'm not here to say like, this is exactly what non-binary means, because no, like, this is what it means to me. This is what I've experienced in my life of understanding more about gender and what that looks like for myself. So I don't want to get too preachy about it. I don't know. But I do think that because I've touched on gender quite a bit, I figured it would be good to kind of share a little bit about my experience being non-binary and what that looks like. So I will definitely probably talk more about the concept just generally in other videos. And as always, if you are non-binary, please feel free to explain, or not explain, but just share what your thoughts are on being a non-binary and how your experience is with that. If you're not, just however you identify, sharing what your views and thoughts are on gender and how you have you know, come to understand that in your life. So anyway, all right, I will talk to you next time. I still don't know how to end these. I feel like I'm very awkward because I feel like I go from talking about something deep to being like, all right, see ya. So I will be back at some point.